Now I know exactly what I need to do. I need to make a note to self. I got to copy the key every time. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Hey, y'all. It is
Hello.
your fave social worker. Or not. It's Rachel.
Hey.
Um, here with my fellow colleagues for today's episode of Clinician Conversations, asterisk. The kids, what y'all doing in there? What's going on when the kids go to therapy? So that is what we are going to talk about today. So I will go ahead and let everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So like I said, I am Rachel, your fave social worker, all of the social media handles. And I am a limited license master social worker.
I'm Jill Chastain, mental health therapist, licensed professional therapist.
Hi, I'm Benjamin Stibbs. I am a licensed professional counselor.
I'm Shayanna Withers, and I'm a temporary limited license psychologist.
And I'm Laurel Huff. I'm a licensed professional counselor.
I'm Ashley, and I'm limited license counseling.
All right. And Dr. Leatrice Brooks, licensed psychologist.
Cool. Well, hey y'all, welcome everybody. So yes, I will go ahead and get us started. So the kiddos, I know my experience and kind of the population that I work with pretty much anybody. So I work with all of the kids as young as 5 and 6, going up into the adolescent, teenage, young adult era. And so when kids come into therapy,
Can I
we are
pause for a
really
minute?
starting with, you sure
Can I
can.
pause? Okay, for just give a lay
Yeah.
of the land so that y'all know what we're gonna do today. Here's because I know a lot of times we do look, Rachel jumped in like we usually do. We just kind of get started and rolling. But what I was thinking today, because kids come in all ages and sizes and shapes and, and all of the above, right? And kids can be anything from for tiny ones to up to 18 years old. And that's really what we're talking about today. And so we're going to break them up into groups according to where they are developmentally, but then also kind of how you typically think about kids, right? Which is K-5, and then middle school, and then high school. And what are the kinds of things that they might want to talk about in therapy? How do you know when to bring your kid to therapy? And what are you doing in the room to help my kid actually improve and grow in the areas that you see that they need to move in? So we're going to start with the littles and then move on up through the ages. All right.
Cool.
Unpause.
Right. So starting with the littles, because I start off, like I said, with ages 5 and up. With the littles, we have to start with the foundational skills of communication, emotions, and relationships. So we start with, what are you feeling? What is sad? What is that? Like, we say that and we hear it, but what is it? What does that look like for you? It's sad. Um, Encouraging kids to really give examples and put actions to their words, because they throw out these words, they hear us as adults use them. They hear their friends at school use it, social media, YouTube, everybody just using a lot of these terms, and the kids don't really know what that is. So when you start with a 5 or 6-year-old and they say, I'm just stressed. Okay, Miss Ma'am. What does stress mean? Like, what is stress? What makes you stress? Why does that stress you out? So yeah, really starting with the foundationals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Do
would
you
say,
use any like play therapy at all for some of those younger kids to help
Yep.
process some of those emotions?
Yes. And I know Jill can probably attest to, she probably hear a party going on when I have the little kids in there. But yes, we play games. My favorite games with the kids are Sorry and Uno. Sorry is my favorite because the game is called Sorry. So, I say, oops,
You're practicing
sorry.
it.
okay, why are we saying sorry? Why did that upset you? Like, like what's going on when you lost, when you had to go back to start?
Mhm.
And then Uno, the kids like kind of know how to play Uno, or at least at 5 or 6, I'm probably teaching them how to play Uno. And so we use the colors of the cards to resemble different emotions.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like
For
that.
Yeah.
sure.
When I was working with little ones, we would play game we have in the office, the thinking, feeling, um, and talking game. And it was really a good game because it's a board game. And you roll the dice and it has these cards and it asks questions about a feeling or a thought or whatever. And it brings up really good conversation. Because when you're working with kids, what I found too, they're not just depending on the age and how mature they are, they're just not gonna sit still, but you can get more information from them and just more of a connection when you kind of I would sit on the floor, play with them. We talk. One of them liked a certain video, and we would watch parts of the video and talk about it. So just being more interactive. And what I found when I do work with, particularly the little ones, they building rapport first with them.
Video.
You may not get to anything deep, for a little while, but you're developing that rapport with them so that they feel comfortable.
One of the things that I like is, and I think we know this, but we may not consider what it looks like in therapy, is socially we say like kids are know more than what you think and they pay attention to more than what you think. And that's true too when it comes to their feelings. So one of the tools that I like to use, I use it actually with adults too, depending on how limited their awareness is. But I have a kid-friendly version of a feeling faces chart, and we go over just the basic faces. Sometimes we turn it into an activity and they can color them in, and that kind of thing. And we're talking about when have you seen this face? What's a situation where you've seen this face? Or who have you seen make this face? Or do you make this face? Or what do you think this means? This face means, and when might it show up for you? And I remember one day in particular, I had a 4-year-old that I was working with, and we went over the feelings. And the next week he came in and he said, I feel blank when my mom does blank. And it was so accurate. I was like, yes, right? Like he knew and he understood the application of the feeling. To the point that you said earlier, Rachel, is yes, we do have to give them the language to describe what they're feelings. And so what they're feeling. So whatever we're saying is what they're going to pick up on, and they're going to pick up on the context and then repeat that. But they may not know what it means, or they may have a difficult time really knowing what to do with that. So it then becomes, when I feel this, then I need to talk to mom, or I need to communicate this, or how can I feel better or feel different. Yeah, those things.
Yeah. I
I would
found
say too.
no,
Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I found that when I was working sometimes with boys, it was hard for some of them to describe their feelings. So we would talk like in pictures, like what do you envision? And that really helped. They could visualize more so than the actual feeling words. Because usually what I would get from some of them is like good, and that's how you feel good.
Mhm.
And you gotta push them a
Mhm.
little bit.
I would say, yeah, using specific examples. So I know kind of similar to Leatrice, when I would work with the kids, I'll have them like I'll take pictures of them and say, show me your face when you mad. And then depending on kind of the reaction I get, if it doesn't kind of match the face that I would think that they would give, I might give them a real life scenario. So I might say you playing on Roblox and somebody, come up and snatch one of your houses. What you gonna do? And then they like, man, he shouldn't. And they give that reaction. I'm like, see, that's when you're feeling, whichever emotion, so that they have a real life example, because we can give, kind of adult life examples and, say, this is what make me stressed when I'm, late on consumers. Okay, that means nothing to a 5-year-old. But if you say, let me take your last Skittle, they might be like, hold on, now we got something to talk about. So I think just giving them real life examples kind of helps them build their vocabulary awareness to their feelings.
Mhm.
And I think to what you said, yes, kids have real life experiences,
Yes.
Mhm.
you know, and they will tell the story in the kid version. And it's something that they need to process and they need to talk about it. And it's okay if, you know, the adults in their life don't necessarily know how to do that. A lot of times, especially when a kid is younger, parents are part of the process because at the end of the day, you are the primary support. So we got to bring you in the room at some point and work to build that relationship, or it may be the parent needs to go to therapy to learn some parenting skills, or you know, just how to navigate the relationship with the child. So it may be that the child is having some significant challenges, or it could be that they're just having basic life challenges and they need somebody to talk it through with.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But kids actually they do really well in therapy. The first experience, I never thought I could work with kids, and then I was forced to when I was in training. And my first kid was a 5-year-old, and she told me her whole life story. Her whole life story. And I knew what it was because I was working in adoption at the time, and I had read her life story. And so she was like, and this and this and this and this. And I was like, wow. I'm like, okay, I could work with a kid because you actually are bringing something to the table.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Shall we
What-
move on to the next age group?
I had one
Yes.
I had one comment I wanted to say. What was helpful for me too, like parents that had challenges engaging with their children, I would have their parent come in and we would play a game together. I did
Mhm.
that before, and it's just teaching parents some skills of how to interact at home.
Yeah. And then it's practice as well
Hmm.
for them to do it in front of you or with you, and then they can, you know, repeat the kind of behavior at home.
Well, I was gonna say too, a lot of kids pick up behaviors from adults around them. So, you know, giving the parents the skills and techniques as well as becoming aware themselves, you know, things that they may have to work on makes a huge difference. And I was gonna say, talking about like emotional identification and teaching kids regulation even at a small age, I like to help the kids that I work with focus on their physical feelings too, because a lot of times when kids are starting to get emotionally dysregulated, you know, they start to feel it in their body first. So becoming aware of those feelings before they get into a state of you know, maybe acting in a way, you know, that we don't want them to act, or maybe they don't want to act that way. So
Mhm.
becoming more aware of that.
All right. So the next group is middle school. So middle school is 6th through 8th grade. So that's roughly around what, 10 or 11 to about 13, maybe 14, depending on birthday.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what have we seen? What works with that age group? What kinds of things might they be dealing with?
I ask more of what my client wants, I would say, and what they need. So I think I've got a 13-year-old right now that I see, and I ask her, you know, are you needing movement? You know, it's there's still control, but it's also there's control in the session and you have control. And what do you need? And then I also let her know, you know, this is what we're going to be talking about so that she has a loose idea of what's going on when she's going to talk to me.
Yeah, way back in the day, I worked with his two brothers, an older kid in our third age group, and then a young boy in the age group we're talking about now. And I had a TV in my office at the time, and I hooked up their PlayStation 3, I think it was at the time, and had both brothers in the room, and we all played a game together, and we were talking and processing through like their divorce, their parents' divorce and things like that. So it was really helpful, at least for these young men, to be doing something else while we were bringing out these discussions about feelings, thoughts, and things like that. So it was a little bit more older version of play therapy.
Mm.
And fortunately, I know enough about video games to actually talk reasonably relevant with young people about these things. But I guess that would be my other point is if you're going to work with kids, you probably do have to, verse yourself in some of the things that kids are doing at this day and age. So
For sure.
And they
I
will
think,
tell you.
yeah. I was
What-
gonna say one of the things that in that population is really explaining what therapy is,
Yeah.
the benefits of it. Because a lot of times at that age, from my experience, their parents are just signing them up.
That's
They
right.
didn't want to come talk to the lady. They don't
Mhm.
got nothing to talk about. They had a good day at school and they ready to go chill at home. So
Mhm.
really explaining to them like, okay, do you know why you're here? No? Okay, like let's talk about some things. Or if you do know why you're here, if your mama just said you gotta go and talk to her,
Yeah.
what could be some things that you think mom would think you need to work on? And kind of still validating their own experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And talking to them first, if you're going to talk to the parents, great, but don't do the parents first separate to the kid because then they're going to think you're just talking about them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For sure.
And also, I would say, because I do this, I see a couple teens regularly, it might come up or reminding them, hey, there's times I might need to talk to mom or dad, but you can trust me, like, yeah. So that they,
Mhm.
yeah, just reminding them that I'm not going to all of a sudden be telling mom, if there's anything that's kind of sensitive that she wants to talk about.
Mhm.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm very upfront with my kids too, that this is a safe place and that I don't share things for them and how I'm there to support them. I think being upfront and honest about that opens the door a little bit because if kids feel like they're coming here because mom or dad sent them, they might have that fear that if they talk to you, you're going to be telling the
Yes.
parent stuff. So you kind of want them to know that from the get-go.
Yeah.
And I think it's the telling the kids and telling the parents, and then also knowing the parents being assured that there are the limits of confidentiality when it comes to if they're going to harm themselves, someone else, or if they're being harmed. And one of the ways that I extend that a bit with kids is if you are engaging in in a high risk behavior.
Mhm.
So if there's something that is putting you at risk that your parents would reasonably want to know about, then we need to tell them. And I am not going to be the bad guy and tell them unless I do it in front of you.
Yep.
So I give them options, which is I can tell your parents in front of you. Excuse me. You can tell your parents in front of me, or you can tell your parents and have them to call me and tell me what you said.
Yeah.
yeah,
And that way we know that their communication in the relationship is there.
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. I've done that before too. I've client was kind of self-harming. And so we talked about it and the dangers, but then also no, they were suicidal. And then I had the parent come back in the office with the client's permission. And then I allowed them to tell, and I was there to kind of be that third person and kind of interject and kind of set it up. And so I made it a safe space and they were able to share with their parent what was going on. So we were able to work on a strategy from there. So that's
hmm
too.
For sure. I think too, kind of extending from that point, once we kind of get to we've built enough rapport and, they trust me enough to know if it is something harmful to them, then, I am gonna talk to mom or dad. But I also use that opportunity to validate their experiences. A lot of times when kids in that age range come in and they say like, man, I've been cutting because, somebody is bullying me, a lot of parents might just devalue what they're saying. Man, it ain't that serious, or yeah, you ain't got to hurt yourself to be mad. So I use that opportunity to be like, what you're feeling is real, what you're going through, that is happening. Let's think of some positive coping mechanisms instead of self-harm. But I think like that is a big thing, is validating their experiences, because at that age, they don't really feel validated. They're trying to validate themselves and prove like I can make my own decisions. Um, so that's something big that I go through with kids in that age group.
Yeah, I was gonna say, along with what you said, educating the parent about cutting, why it happens. And for me, I always go back to, generations, right? Like mental health up until not that long ago wasn't even
I think
a real thing for a lot of families. They grew up in a generation where you don't need it. So it might even be hard for them to bring their kids here and then finding out something like that. So giving them the, education on what cutting is, why they do it, things like that. So
I also want to say, before we move to the next age group, is there is value in playing games with kids.
Mhm.
And there are a couple ways that I've used them. Sometimes when kids are older in this like middle school age and I want to do games, I do them as a relationship building something, right? And for them, playing a game may be a reward because they sat down and talked to me. I'm also super flexible. I remember one kid, this is probably the first middle schooler I worked with. This kid was he was on the couch with his legs, he was this way on the couch with his feet on the wall and his head on the floor. I didn't
That's he's
care.
having a good conversation.
Look, I
Twirling
didn't
your
care.
hair.
I'm like, as long as he talked, I had another kid. He wanted so bad to sit in the chair that spin around. This kid liked to have spent himself to death. I didn't care. He was talking. And with those kids, because they needed movement and that was fine. Nobody had ever really sat down and just had a conversation with them. I didn't really care as long as you're talking. And for them, talking to me, because it was so hard for them, playing a game was a reward. But here's what I realized was happening when we were playing games. It became relationship building. And they learned how to take turns. They learned how to be supportive. There were two games that we had in that office, and they were video games. One of them, the kid creamed me every single time. Like I was no competition at all. Well, at some point he got sick of creaming me. And so he was like, let's play together. So I think it was Mario Kart. I'm going to drive the cart and you just sit on the back and throw the stuff off. So we tag
You
team
don't know
that
what you're
game.
doing.
Right, I did. I was terrible. But then let us play Kirby. It was a wrap. I was on it. Like he had no chance. And he knew he was going to lose every time, but he still wanted to play the game. And so it was great for me to notice how he grew and developed when it came to relationships and considering other people, and working together. Like that was also part of the process, even though we were playing a game. And so there are skills to be learned through that process as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so this last group, high school. So that's about 14 to 18, maybe 19, depending on the birthday. So high schoolers, what is that like in therapy?
They're interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like they don't like the term kid. So they're not a young adult either, because you are still a kid. So it's finding that balance between like valuing and empowering them to become successful young adults, but also still reminding them that they are still minors.
Mhm.
See, like you get the juniors and seniors, they are like, I don't care what mama say, I'm about to go do what I do, and then they have a consequence, and then they in session like, well, I don't know why she tripping. I told her I was about to do this. So it's really working on those communication skills, and like ownership of their actions is a important thing that I focus on in those sessions.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, like, so you touched on the communication. Also, it's that independence that they're starting to
Mm-hmm.
gain. And I think too, they are, they've learned all these things from the people they've grown up with, so their parents and people around them. And so a big part is probably wanting to like separate themselves from that, or starting to see like um, how they deal with their emotions, maybe healthy or unhealthy. And so, yeah, so that is a really big piece. And I think too, being patient, because working with that age group, you might get some teens who are talkative. You might get some who come into therapy not talking at all, not wanting to be there. So really just being patient and like stepping into their world, you know, trying to build that rapport, learning about their interests, what they like to do. So.
Yeah.
One
And
one of the strategies I use sometimes is because I'll get kids that say, they say, I don't know, right?
mhm.
I don't know, like, whatever.
I
Like,
give them a
well,
limit. You got this many.
yes, do you hear me? I told I said, look, you got 2 I don't knows per session. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. You get 2 per session. And I ain't no questions asked. And so um I remember they would say, I don't know. And I would ask them, do you really want to use that one on this question? And they would think about it. Like, and the crazy part about it is giving them a limit, they would actually comply with that. Because you would think they would still just be like, whatever. No, they don't mind the relationship, and it's okay to put boundaries on it, but still give them the autonomy to be able to say, I don't know if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And learning how to work with them in a way that brings them in the room and makes it a collaborative experience for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually used the I don't know differently. So something I might do even with my adults, I know we're talking about kids, but kids too, is saying, usually when we say I don't know, we do know. But depending on what the conversation is consisting of, people often use I don't know as a way to either make the conversation go in a different direction, or maybe it's just too hard to talk about, or maybe it's embarrassing, and that using, or sorry, I'm tripping over my words, but saying that to kids, like generally when people say they don't know, they do know. It just might be really difficult to talk about. And actually that's really opened the floor for a lot of my teenagers, and then they just start spilling the beans. So even some of my adults.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, because that I don't know. Usually it's I don't know the perfect words to express this, so I'm just gonna not say anything, and then they kind of bottle up and things like that. I know one other thing I do with I have a young man that I've been working with for a couple of years now, and did a lot of, since I'm a parent too, I did a lot of kind of translating the the consequences and things that they think are just arbitrary from their parents, and they don't make any sense to them, and they don't want to have, the consequences and things. Being able to give them that, like, that perspective of, okay, you did this. They're doing this because, not because they're trying to make your life a living hell or horrible or anything. They love and care about you, and it's coming from that place, and they're trying to give you some boundaries. Here's maybe possibly another option of what they're doing versus trying to ruin your entire life and such like that. So being able to, because I noticed with that population specifically, there's that pull to be independent, but like Rachel was saying, you're still a kid. So there's this constant almost vibration back and forth. So being able to kind of help them make sense of their parents' rule sets and things like that, is a lot of what I've been doing with that population too. So
I use the words yes and quite a bit, especially, yeah, with young adults and teens in regards to their parents, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Because there
Yes.
can also be,
And
there can be the rebelliousness or whatever, but there can also be, my parents really did a lot for me, or I don't want to be disloyal to them. And it's more inviting a space of, you can feel both, right? You can feel love for your parents and also really be irritated with them right now, or wish that they would let you do more. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think with that too, teaching kids, they often compare, right? They're in a state where they're comparing themselves to their peers all the time. Well, their parents let them do this or that, and you know, giving them a little education on why that may be. Maybe that person, their parents aren't really present or around, but you have parents that really care about you, things like that.
Yeah.
It's hard sometimes with children, and particularly well any age group that we've been talking about, when they have to go between both homes. I've had a number of young people that I work with, and it's different in each household. And when they're in situations that they don't have any control over, I give them coping skills, and we talk about resilience when, when they don't have much control. We talk about focusing on their behavior and their reaction. But something Ashley said too, when young people, they want to do what their friends do. I have clients make their parents make like a values board or something that they put up, like in this house, this is what the Chastains do. These are our values, and actually putting those up and working on it together so they know that what that household does, this we don't do that here. In Chastains, we do this. And
Hmm.
that kind of helps sometimes.
Yeah, that's really good, setting standards and rule
Yeah.
sets and structure for kids.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think kids too, no matter the age, they always need language, right? And they also need from us as parents, like being a parent myself, um, expressing my own emotions to them, so they're able to do the same. I I feel like kids pick up a lot of what we do as parents, so we're setting that example for them. Yeah, so even for my own kids, I always give them the terms as to why I'm feeling the way I am, or why I'm doing things the way that I am, so we have some level of like connectedness and understanding. Instead of just saying no, 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 I give reasons and understanding as to why that is. And I haven't always been that type of parent myself, but since I've done that, and since I've been in a therapy setting working with parents, I feel like um it it works so much better that way when there's just understanding from both parties.
Yeah,
Good
agreed.
teachable moment.
For sure. I know I had something to add as we were talking about parents. And so like the topic is, what are you really doing in there? Parents legit have that question. And so I think it's important to remind parents that while growth is linear, it's not overnight. So
Hmm.
parents will say, well, they've been to 2 and 3 sessions and they still cutting up at school and at home and they still talking back. You're right. They probably are. However, those are the things that we're continuing to work on. So sometimes you may not see growth until 3, 6, 9 months into, having them go to therapy. And so I think that's important I know I covered that the first few sessions. Like I say, yep, we've had a good session. Keep in mind, um, growth is not very fast when you're, taking the therapy route. Like if you want something quick, that might be like a medication and therapy kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you're just going the therapy route, it's gonna take some time and work.
Well, yeah,
Well, and
definitely.
sometimes we're not going to have those parents that even want to be involved, right? They just want to send their kids to therapy, and they just want us to wave this wand and they're
Fix them.
but that's
Yes.
not how it works. And sometimes too, like us as clinicians, like we have to develop the skills, to work with kids when parents just don't have any interest in participating in that, and what that looks like. I had another thought with that. Oh, I was gonna say learned behaviors, right? Kids often learn behavior. So if they're growing up in a home that's consists of yelling and being angry, and then now the parent sees something wrong because their kids are doing it, if your kid is now 16, would you expect them to unlearn that behavior right away? They've been exposed to that for 16 years now. Nobody's gonna just change that overnight.
Yeah, that's so true.
I
Decades
wanna
of learning it, and to unlearn it takes a lot of time.
I was gonna clarify, Rachel, that growth is not linear. It doesn't happen in a straight line. And because sometimes what happens is we have those moments of setbacks.
Yes.
Like something happened, maybe
Sure.
there's another major life event that happens, or we're moving forward. You know how people say there's a saying, I take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, right? That's because growth and change aren't linear. And so sometimes parents might get disappointed because they see a recurrence of a behavior. I've heard that happen before. They're like, well, my kid grew out of this, and why are they doing it now? Something's probably going on emotionally. There's
Hmm.
For
something
sure.
that needs needs your attention. And we got to figure out what that is.
Yeah, I would say when I meant linear, like, yes, because you have those divots, like if you were to look at, some a graph, like it can go up and still have those moments where, it's fluctuating. But overall, like, the child can still be growing, can be trending
Yes.
upward and still have moments of where
Yes.
they may regress or be like
I
stagnant.
like that. Trending upwards.
Trending upwards. Yes, I like it.
Ah, yes. All right. Final thoughts. What final thoughts do we have?
Heal these babies. Get them in therapy.
Right?
Get
Yeah.
them in therapy. Okay. One of the things that I recommend, if your kid needs therapy before middle school, get them in therapy. By the time your kid gets to middle school, if it's not a therapist, there needs to be some adult in their life that they trust and that you trust. And you trust them to that adult to say the things to your kid that you would say.
Mhm.
And give them the recommendations and send them on their way the way that you would, but it's not you. And because it's not you, your kid is going to hear it differently, even if it's the same thing that you say all the time. And
Yeah.
so you want that person to be there. And it could be a therapist, a coach, a teacher. It could be a family member, a mentor. It could be anybody, but some adult that they respect and you respect, that's in alignment with you, that can also provide additional support or an avenue for your kid. And one of the things that I've heard multiple times recently, and I love it, I think Ashley, you were talking about how like the temperature is changing around going to therapy, is I'm hearing more and more people tell me that their kid asked for a therapist. Like kids are asking for it now. Or the parent says, maybe, we should get you a therapist. And the kid is like, okay, yes, let's do it. Like, I am so loving that it's now being seen as more of a resource. And I think, to an extent, kids can start to help adults to be able to be online with it. Because sometimes adults are still struggling to come because of all the messaging that we get socially about what it means to go to therapy. And so even you as a parent, if your kid needs therapy, look, get the help, get the support. It doesn't mean that you are a bad parent. It just means that your kid got some stuff going on and you need some help. Right. And we do that with everything else. Stuff is going on and we need some help. We go to the doctor, mental, emotional things are going on. We need some help. We go to therapy. So it's not a bad thing to go. It doesn't mean that you just ruined your kid.
Which I mean,
It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that I need things to be different than the way they are right now. And I see you as a person that can help.
that might be hard for some parents though, because I mean, obviously we know I'm such a generational person with older generations, some households feelings weren't even allowed, so when they become parents, they might expect the same from their kids, right? It's weird if you cry or
It's the suck it up buttercup mentality that we fight against all the time.
Yep. And I think too, we need to stop comparing generations, right? I feel like a lot of people are like, I wasn't allowed to do that if I did this, but times are changing and things are changing. So what kids are going through right now are probably not what we went through and experienced when we were kids. So being accepting of that.
And look, even if it was the same exact thing, they are allowed to have a different experience.
For sure. They're not you.
They are
Right.
Just because you
not.
didn't cry over that don't mean I'm not gonna cry over that.
Right. I can have a tear even if you didn't. That's okay.
For sure.
Right. We could be sitting here in the same situation and it's going on right now and still be having completely different reactions. And that is fine.
Yeah.
Right.
And working with young people, I learned so much from them. I mean, I love them and they just provide such a, I don't know, just they bring life. I like working with them. And I went to an event this morning for children. That's why I started off saying mental health therapist, because I've been saying that. I said that all morning when I was introducing myself. But I just think just kids are amazing. And they need us, and I love them, and I think they have a bright future, and they are the present, and I learn a lot from them as well. So Bring the babies on.
So Pastor Boyd says, heal these babies. It means you are a good parent if you send your kids to therapy, and it's time to change the narrative.
For sure.
Mhm.
Facts.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Thank you for joining us, Pastor Boyd,
Thank you.
and for sharing. All right, so that's all we got. You want to do the closeout, Rachel?
All right, y'all. It's been real. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Clinician Conversations. And what are we doing in therapy with the kids? So we hope that you guys will join us in a couple months when we come back. And as always, peace and love, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.